So before Sarah and I moved to Dagenham 18 months ago, roughly, we lived in North London. We were at a Bible college there. And one of the things I liked to do, Sarah didn't do it as much. One of the things I liked to do was go and play golf on a Saturday morning. So I joined a golf club. When you're a student, club memberships are super cheap, so it's dreamy. And golf, I really enjoy golf. It's probably the most frustrating sport I've ever played. And you might question, why do you bother keep playing it? But there is something addictive about it for anyone who knows. Anyone who's played, you mess a shot up and then you hit a good shot and you're like, oh, maybe I am actually good, and gets you into your head and keeps you coming back. Now, there's another reason I play golf, to meet people outside of church. Like when you work for a church, it's very easy to only know you guys, which is great. But it's also helpful to get to know other people as well outside of church. And there was a senior minister once said to me, like, keep your golf going for as long as you can, because it is a great opportunity to spend time getting to know people in a really normal setting for them and having opportunities to maybe tell them about Jesus. And so for 3 years, I prayed pretty regularly for the guys I played with. There was a group of between 10 to 20 of us would play on a Saturday morning together. I prayed regularly. I had quite a few chats with them about the gospel, little chats, sometimes bigger chats. There were some weeks where actually we'd talk about one thing one week and someone would come back to me the next week and be like, oh, I've been thinking about this. What about this? I invited them to cow services. One year we invited them and no one came, pure rejection. The next year we invited them again and we said we'd put food on beforehand. And actually 7 or 8 of them said they'd come. And then in the 48 hours before, nearly all of them backed out. Actually, for some quite good reasons. One of them ended up in hospital. But we had one guy come around to ask for food, but then he couldn't come to the service because some of his extended family had turned up unannounced. Another couple turned up to the service. After the service, made it pretty clear that they were there for the tradition of carols rather than getting to know Jesus. And so after 3 years, I look back and think, what progress, Jesus, did you make in their lives? It feels like nothing. Even sometimes, actually, it's even sadder than that. See, it can look like the progress of Jesus goes in the reverse. See, at university, I had a group of friends, Christian friends, who I actually really looked up to, who were a great example to me to following Jesus, helped me follow Jesus. Since university, a number of them have given up on Jesus. They've given up and gone their own way. They will no longer call themselves Christians. And I'm sort of left thinking, wait a minute, Jesus, aren't you meant to be building your kingdom? That powerful kingdom of heaven which broke out into the world with you, doesn't look so powerful now. I'm left feeling like, why? What's going on? It doesn't really feel like how the kingdom of heaven looks in the Gospels. Why is it different? Maybe you've had similar feelings. Maybe you've invited friends to church and they just keep saying no. Maybe you've talked to someone, a work colleague, for a number of years and they just don't seem interested in Jesus at all. Maybe you've lived in Dagenham for 5 years, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and you look back and you think, what progress has the kingdom of heaven made in the people that I've got to know around here? We can be left feeling like, oh, has it failed? Has it failed? Maybe you're here, maybe you've been here for the last few weeks, or you've been to church a number of times in your life, and you've heard about Jesus' power. In the last few weeks, we've seen his power, his authority, his ability to cure diseases, to drive out demons. You've heard about the kingdom of heaven, God's heavenly rule coming down into this world through Jesus, and it looking impressive. But you look around at us at the church, and you look around the church and the world, and we look fairly weak, don't we? And we look rather unimpressive. And you're like, why? Why the disconnect between the kingdom of heaven coming with Jesus and then its ongoing sort of ness? See, God's heavenly rule, the kingdom of heaven, it doesn't really look like that much, does it, compared to what it did in Jesus' time? Now think about the disciples, those 12 apostles, okay? Put yourself back in their shoes. They have seen the power of Jesus firsthand. Uniquely, they've even had it in their fingertips as they were sent out and given authority and power to evidence the gospel, the good news of Jesus, that the kingdom had come near. They've even sort of tasted and seen it. We read about it. They saw it with their own eyes. Yet, all around them, even back then, they saw rejection of Jesus. Rejection and opposition. What are they thinking? See, chapter 13 is in the middle of a number of chapters of rejection. In chapter 11, we get confusion. John the Baptist, the guy who's meant to be sort of the pin-up poster preacher of the day for Jesus' kingdom, is a bit confused about who Jesus is. And then in chapter 12, chapter 14, 15, 16, there is rejection by the religious elite. Those who you're like, they're going to be walking straight into the kingdom of heaven, aren't they? They're going to be the ones backing it. Why are they rejecting it? At the end of chapter 12, even Jesus' own blood family, his mothers and brothers, stood outside and don't get who he is. What's going on? And I think this is even more surprising when we do consider what the kingdom of heaven is. See, the kingdom of heaven, it is God's reign and rule in the realm of God. It is where God is now, his power and his authority. It is his pure and perfect reign. It is unstoppable. It is undeniable. It is unquestionable. It is where he reigns. Up there, there is nothing else but his power and authority reigning. And with Jesus, that power and authority is sort of broken into this world. It is the kingdom which is promised about in places in the Old Testament, like 2 Samuel 7. It is the kingdom which we hear about in Daniel. And this is going to be a question for the youth. Do you remember anything about God's heavenly kingdom and worldly kingdoms in Daniel when you did it at TGIs? There's only a couple of you here, so unfortunate. Can we crack our minds? Do you remember anything about what God was like in Daniel? Yeah.
Daniel got sent into a pit of lions. Jesus helped him survive.
Yeah. So there was like an earthly kingdom which sort of oppressed one of God's people, but actually God was more powerful, wasn't he? And he kept the lion's mouth shut all night. Have you got anything to add? There's a burning furnace, yeah. And so there's an earthly powerful kingdom which tries to kill some of God's faithful people, but God's power and rule and authority is above them and stops it from happening. See, what we see in Daniel, this book in the Old Testament, is that there are real earthly powerful kingdoms. Babylon had a lot of power, but God's heavenly rule, his heavenly kingdom, is above all of them. He moves them around a bit like pieces on a chessboard. And so when we consider that power up there, which is more powerful than President Trump, President Xi, President Putin, but that is the power that God has. When we look around at his church today, it just seems a bit weak. Why is it so rejected? If it is that powerful, how can it be rejected? Why is it still rejected today? Why do we feel opposition today when we talk about Jesus? Why doesn't the kingdom of heaven look more impressive? And well, to help us understand that, Jesus gives us 3 stories, 3 parables in quite quick succession. And parables, they're stories, often with quite a simple truth. It's a truth that we see often at the end of a parable, sort of the main punchline. And here the parables reveal to us something unseen about the kingdom of heaven, something unseen about the kingdom of heaven. And they do that by telling us a story that the first listeners would really have understood. And so Jesus says to us today, the kingdom of heaven will one day be visibly great, but it might not seem like it as we wait. One day the kingdom of heaven will be visibly great, but it might not seem like it as we wait. And so these 3 parables, these stories, these pictures show us what the kingdom of heaven is like. Note, these are parables, they're not a code. They're not to be decoded. So you can't sort of look at every detail and every consequence of every detail in the parable and expect to find an easy equivalent in the world today. That'd be missing the point of the parable. No, we're to let the parable tell us what the kingdom of heaven is like. So we're going to look at those 3 parables now. Have a look with me at verse 24. Jesus told them, there's big crowds around him, another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So the kingdom of heaven is like a farmer. He gets his seed and he goes, shh, chucked it into the field, and then he waits for it to grow. But while we're all asleep, someone else comes and does something else. The evil one comes, and instead of having good seed, he's got a load of weeds, something that no one wants in their garden, let alone in their fields. He sows bad seed across it to try and miss it and mess it up. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. And what happens? Well, obviously, they grow up together. When the wheat sprouted and formed ears, then this is verse 26, have a look with me. Then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them." And so it's like young wheat actually can look a little bit like a weed. It looks a bit like grass. And so there's an issue, isn't there? As they grow up, how do you tell them apart? So they look a bit like this. They look so similar. There are actually two different colours on there. And they look similar. And Jesus, and not Jesus, the master, the farmer is like, let them grow. Let them grow a little bit more. Verse 30, let them both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. And so the farmer's like, okay, you're going to let them grow. You're going to let them come to their full height. Because then we'll tell them, because actually wheat changes colour. When it's growing, it's now yellow. It's easy to tell the weeds from the wheat. And he sends the harvesters to collect them. And there are just two places where they go. Oh, it's going to right. Not very tall, I am. It's all right, you can tell the difference. There's two places where they go. Either the weeds are collected up, bundled up, and chucked into the fire to be burned because they are of no use. Or the wheat is collected into the barn of the master. Why don't you take 30 seconds, just with someone next to you, and think, what do you think Jesus is saying about the kingdom of heaven? 30 seconds, just have a little chat to someone next to you. What do you think Jesus is saying about the kingdom of heaven as he tells us this story? See, Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven will one day be perfect and pure. The kingdom of heaven will one day be pure. But as we wait, there is evil here for sure. The kingdom of heaven will one day be pure. But as we wait, in this time, there is evil for sure. Jesus moves on. There's another parable. Let's have a look at it. Verse 31. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. When a man took it and planted it in his field, which a man took and planted in his field, there is the smallest of all seeds. Yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. So a mustard seed. I don't know if you know. I've got one here. I'll see if can I open it. See if you can see it. Can I get one out? Come on. Yeah. Oh. That's more than hard to get out. Right, I got one. Okay, this is a mustard seed. Can you see? I can't even know if I can hold it small enough. Can you see it? It's just there. That is a mustard seed. And so it starts really small, doesn't it? But then when it's planted in the ground, I'll stick it here so you can see it. There you go. When it's planted in the ground, it's hidden and it doesn't look very impressive. And then it grows to be a tree which is bigger than most other garden herbs, actually bigger than all garden herbs. The tree can grow, if you think, between this pillar and that pillar, about the height, the width of the branches can be that big, and the height can be above the top of the projector. It goes from that tiny little thing to a massive tree. It can look impressive and not like dominating, and then it dominates the garden. One day it will be large. Again, why don't you have a little chat? What do you think this is telling us about the kingdom of heaven? Take 20 seconds between yourselves. See, the kingdom of heaven will one day be large, but as we wait, it starts small and doesn't look like it's in charge. See, the kingdom of heaven will one day be large, but as we wait now, it's small and doesn't really look in charge. Jesus then quickly moves on. Have a look with me, verse 33, another parable. He told them Still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 30 kilograms of flour until it worked through the dough. Anyone know what yeast does? How it works? Yeah?
You is what grows bread.
Yeah, it is. Good start. So yeast, it makes the bread rise. And yeast, well, it's actually tiny amounts of yeast you need. I've got some yeast here. You see, you can't really see it. It's very small. Just in my hand, this is going to go on the floor, but oh well, we can clean that up afterwards. Yeast is tiny. This amount of yeast in this packet is so little. But actually, when you put it through tons of flour, this is about 8 kilograms of flour in there. Put it through that tiny amount of yeast, 7 grams of yeast go through all that flour. It works invisibly through the flour and eventually makes dough. But to make dough, it has to get through all of it. Yeast is small and works invisibly, but it then goes through a massive amount of flour and makes dough and turns it into bread. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast, Jesus says. It is small, but works through and permeates massive quantities of flour to achieve what it needs to achieve. I wonder if you see what Jesus is saying. The kingdom of heaven will one day have worked through earth and all. But as we wait, its work might seem invisible. The kingdom of heaven will one day have worked through earth and all, but as we wait, its work seems invisible. Doesn't this make sense of our experience? Our experience of living in a world, maybe trying to witness about Jesus, and getting rejected, facing oppositions as Christians. And our experience that the kingdom of heaven actually doesn't seem to be as powerful as it looked when Jesus was around. Make it sense of why when Jesus was around, the kingdom of heaven was rejected as well. See, one day God's heavenly rule will reign over the earth as it does in heaven. His power and authority, the kingdom of heaven as expected in the Old Testament, will one day be completely and utterly here. It will be pure. It will be the only kingdom on earth. It will be large. It will be everywhere. It will have worked through the earth completely. But Jesus, he's revealing to us an important understanding of when that will happen. Jesus is telling us the hidden truth of timing. See, it doesn't happen straight away. It's begun with Jesus. The kingdom of heaven broke into this world with Jesus. But then it takes time and works sometimes in invisible ways as it conquers all. See, it broke out with Jesus, but sometimes its work is invisible to us. We might feel that as we talk to people about Jesus years and years and years, for years, and we see no results. It's begun, but until the day that it's made perfectly pure, we live in a world where the kingdom is advancing, kingdom of heaven is advancing, but there is also evil. There is also opposition to it. There's therefore rejection of invites. Maybe you're going to invite someone to Passion for Life next month, and they'll just turn back and say, no, thank you. To some extent, we shouldn't be surprised because Jesus tells us what the world's like. Maybe you'll invite someone, they'll come along, and afterwards they'll be like, meh, thanks, but I don't really want to know Jesus. We shouldn't be surprised as there is evil in the world. Maybe one day you'll actually be rejected from a friendship or even your own family for sticking with what Jesus says over what your family wants you to do. See, the kingdom of heaven will one day be visibly great, but it might not seem like it as we wait. The kingdom of heaven will one day be pure, but as we wait, there is evil for sure. The kingdom of heaven will one day be large, but as we wait, it starts small and doesn't seem in charge. The kingdom of heaven will one day have worked through earth and all, but as we wait, its work can seem invisible. And see, whether we get this timing and understanding about the timing, or is going to somewhat determine if we get to enjoy the kingdom at the end. And therefore, that depends on how we listen to Jesus today. Do we hear what Jesus is saying and come to him for understanding? Or do we hear what Jesus is saying and think, yeah, that's not for me, or I don't understand and walk the other way? Or even more so, do we hear it and go, I know how to explain everything, so I'll just go with my understanding? Or just think it's below us? Earlier in chapter 13, a parable that we didn't read, Jesus shows us that sometimes he uses parables as a judgment on people. It is a judgment. It is to show who are actually listening to him and who are just sort of hearing his words, but ignoring them. Here, in today's verses, we see a second reason Jesus uses parables. Have a look with me at verse 34. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter hidden things since the creation of the world. See, Jesus' use of parables is not a new thing. Parables are used in the Old Testament. And what Jesus is doing as he uses parables is actually completing a pattern set up already in the Old Testament to help us to recognize something more about him. Parables in the Old Testament, they spoke about hidden truth to God's people, truth about who God is, about what they're like, about what's going to happen, so that God's people can follow God. Here we see Jesus telling us the hidden truth about how the full, complete kingdom of heaven, with all its power and authority, will come about and when it will, so that we, as God's people following Jesus today, can wait and live for him. And so I guess the question is, are we going to be like the disciples? Are we going to be like the disciples in verse 36? Have a look at what they do. Then he left the crowd and went into a house. His disciples came to him and said, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the fields. Are we going to be like the disciples, away from sort of the masses and the hype? Are we here to listen to Jesus or for some other reason? Are we here to listen to Jesus or for some other reason? Because when we listen to Jesus, he reveals truth, truth which will keep us walking with him, truth which will mean that we stand firmly with him even when we're rejected, even when we're opposed, even when things don't seem like we'd expect them to seem. In this world, rejected when we're reaching Dagenham with the good news of Jesus. We might expect that good news to go out and completely and utterly take over Jesus, but a lot of you guys have been here longer than I have. Take over Dagenham. A lot of you guys have been here longer than I have. And to my knowledge, the whole of Dagenham has not bent a knee to Jesus yet. That can be cause us to question. And so are we going to listen to Jesus explain? And Jesus does explain, gives us some more understanding if we're willing to listen. Verse 37, he said, the one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. So Jesus is saying, isn't he? He's saying the world is a mixed place. The kingdom is there. The kingdom of heaven has come, and there are people who are part of the kingdom, but there also is evil. The devil is real, and he gets up to his work. We'll continue. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are the angels. There's a time where harvest comes, where God sorts out the mess of this world. Verse 40, as the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out his kingdom, everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears to hear, whoever has ears, let them hear. You see what Jesus is saying? He is saying that one day the impurity of this world will be completely and utterly cleansed, and there will be a day where the harvest happens and the wheat and the weeds are separated. People have two options. There are only two options. And Jesus says, look, if you have ears, that last bit, whoever has ears, let them hear, that can feel almost like a sort of, maybe you might want to listen. That's a command. The one who has ears had better listen. It is serious what Jesus is saying. And if we have ears, then we're going to want to hear what Jesus is saying. because he's telling us something about the future which affects now. So the question is, are we here to listen to Jesus or for some other reason? If we are here to listen to Jesus and hear him, therefore we're going to hear him reveal truth about the future. Truth that there are only two options in the future. In many ways, it is very simple. It is a blazing furnace or enjoying the kingdom forever. See, the kingdom of heaven, God's heavenly rule, will one day rule completely over the earth. And there are only two options. And therefore, there are only two options now. Either with Jesus as one of his disciples. We don't have to be perfect. That's not what Jesus is asking. Read the rest of the gospel. He knows that. We're not going to be perfect. But are we going to follow Jesus, listen to him? Or are we not? And be against him with the evil one? So I guess if we're listening to Jesus, we're going to want to sort ourselves out personally, aren't we, at this point? We're going to want to think about which one do we want to be in. We're going to want to count the cost. We're going to want to work it out and take it seriously. Surely we're going to want to be a disciple of Jesus before it's too late. If you're wondering about how to do that, feel free to come up and chat to me or Sam or just someone next to you. It's not rocket science. I guess if we're hearing Jesus today and listening to him, then we're hearing him reveal truth about the future. And so in some senses, we're going to want to be disciple-making disciples, because we will have loved ones and friends and families and neighbors and colleagues, people we've never met before, that we're going to want to let know about the truth of reality and help them to follow Jesus and become disciples before it's too late. So what might that look like if we do that this week? It might look like we start to pray. It might be that the first step is to start to pray for opportunities to talk about Jesus. Start to pray for boldness. It can be hard. God often gives us opportunities, but it actually can be pretty scary to take it, because in a world where there is evil, we will be rejected. And no one likes being rejected. It might look like thinking and praying about who you can invite to Passion for Life events in the next month, or Easter services, or even just church after Easter. And I guess it's going to start to look like action on the ground once we've prayed, of taking those steps to invite people, to talk to people about Jesus, giving them the chance to be part of his kingdom and enjoy life with him. Maybe that looks like sharing something of our story, something of what Jesus has done in our lives. We do this with wisdom and care. We don't just sort of pin someone down on the floor and ram it down their throat. No, Jesus has a lot to say about how we use our tongues and our words. But now we know the future. Surely we're going to want them to be there. If we're here listening to Jesus reveal truth about today, that the fact that this world that we live in, this area, is going to be mixed. The kingdom will be advancing, but there will be evil here too. That, I guess, it helps us as we seek to make disciples, as we seek to chat to people and face rejection, as we seek to take opportunities and see no results. Then knowing what the kingdom is like, the fact that it starts small and will one day be big, that it will one day be pure and it's not now. Well, that's going to help us, isn't it? So that we don't get knocked down. After 20 years of witnessing to an area, we can keep going. We don't stumble in our faith when we're rejected time and time again, because actually Jesus tells us it could be well like that. When we feel like the powerful kingdom doesn't have such visible power, when we feel like the kingdom of heaven actually looks fairly unimpressive compared to the power of Jesus's day, well, knowing the timing, knowing how the kingdom is coming, knowing what it is like, well, that can help us stand firm, because we have a certainty in Jesus that in him, the kingdom of heaven, God's heavenly rule, has broken into this world. We've seen it with our own eyes in the last few weeks. Go back and listen to the sermons. And so one day the kingdom of heaven will be visibly great. It will be pure and there will be no evil. It will be large and it will be everywhere. But it might not seem like it as we live here, as we work here, as we wait. Let's pray.